hurricane damage in the mountains. That's not something you hear every day. Definitely grabs your attention.
He really does.
So what made Helene's impact so unique? We're diving into a Category 4 hurricane, slammed into Florida, but it's the mountains, right? That's the unexpected part.
Right. And what's really interesting is it wasn't just Helene on its own.
Okay.
By the time, the remnants of Helene reached Appalachia, you already had the setup for some truly catastrophic flooding.
So hold on. In the mountains, you'd think those peaks would be like, nope, not today, like a shield.
Yeah.
Not a funnel for a disaster.
You would, wouldn't you? But that's the thing about mountains. They don't block the rain. They channel it.
Oh, yeah.
Think of it like, if you imagine a bowling alley, instead of the rain spreading out, it's all funneled into one lane. That's what those mountains do with all that water.
Wow.
It's just increases its speed, increases the concentration, and to make matters worse, the ground was already soaked.
Yeah.
Really, really soaked.
Before Helene even hit.
Exactly. They were dealing with what they call once in a 1,000-year rainfall.
Which is, you hear that, and it's almost like you skip over it.
Right.
Once in a 1,000-year rainfall. It means what happened before Helene was practically unheard of.
Yeah.
So you've got this, primed environment.
Totally.
And then Helene comes along, so then what?
Disaster. Recipe for disaster. All that water has nowhere to go.
Right.
It can't spread out, so it's just funneled into the valleys, streams, turns them into, raging torrents.
Okay, so the geography is a setup, but it can't be the whole story.
No, absolutely not. This is where the human impact comes in. So many of the hardest hit areas, rural Appalachia, often lower income, and they don't have the resources to bounce back from even a little bit of flooding.
Meaning they're starting from a more vulnerable position.
Exactly. And oftentimes the infrastructure just wasn't built for this, not even close. These, what they call, once-in-a-lifetime events, which are happening more and more.
And this whole, mountains funnel water thing, it got me thinking, you mentioned Asheville getting hit hard. And I'm thinking about urban planning, in these mountainous regions. How do we need to adapt, knowing this vulnerability exists?
Yeah.
Are we rethinking how we design for resilience in these areas that are prone to these dramatic events?
It's a huge question, and honestly, it's an area where we desperately need more research. We actually know surprisingly little about how hurricanes and these, complex mountain terrains, how they interact.
Right.
For instance, are there microclimates within Appalachia that make flooding worse? How does deforestation or even just development on slopes change how water runs off?
Okay.
We need more research. It's crucial if we want to really predict risk and actually have strategies to deal with this.
It's we're trying to put together this puzzle, but we've only got half the pieces.
Exactly.
But even with more research, we can't change what's already happened.
Right.
We're seeing these reports, over 100 lives lost, millions without power. Officials are comparing this damage to Hurricane Katrina.
Yeah.
Those are some stark numbers.
It is. And I think even those numbers, they don't really capture what's happening on the ground.
Right.
One official called it biblical devastation. And I think that really drives home the sheer scale of destruction.
Yeah.
Entire communities, think about it. Rebuilding not just homes, lives, livelihoods. We're talking decades of recovery.
Decades. It's easy to just hear that word and keep going. Decades.
Right.
We're not just talking about bricks and mortar. This is deep socioeconomic scars that these kinds of events leave behind.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned earlier, many of these communities were already struggling.
And on top of that, you have the issue of flood insurance.
Oh, right.
Which is crucial for rebuilding after something like this.
Yeah.
It's less common in these areas.
So they're hit harder and they have fewer resources to bounce back. That's tough. It's easy to want to make a direct connection.
Right.
Hurricane Helene equals climate change.
Right.
But it's not always that simple, and it's probably not that helpful.
No, you're right. We can't definitively point to this and say climate change caused this.
Right.
But what we can say is climate change, it sets the stage.
Yeah.
It creates these conditions where these events, extreme weather events, they're more likely and they're more intense.
Like turning up the dial on a pressure cooker.
Exactly. The whole underlying system is it's more volatile, It's primed for disaster. And so it begs the question, was Hurricane Helene, with this devastating inland impact, was it a tragic anomaly or is this a glimpse into the future?
Right.
Warmer waters mean stronger storms.
Mm.
Warmer air holds more moisture. You get heavier rainfall.
Yeah.
It's basic physics.
So even if we can't like directly pin this on climate change, it's playing a huge role in creating the conditions that led to it.
Absolutely.
And if this is a taste of the future, I mean, what does that mean for a place like Asheville, which got hit particularly hard by all this? It's a wake-up call, right? Like if Asheville, which we think of as this kind of climate haven,
right,
if it can get hit this hard by an inland hurricane,
yeah,
what does that mean for everybody else? It really is this like reminder, this interconnected system.
It is.
And, we keep saying it, these like once-in-a-lifetime events
right,
happening more often. It makes you wonder, are we prepared for this?
That is the question, isn't it? And honestly, I think based on what we saw with Helene, we've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
A lot of work to do. We're talking about rethinking infrastructure,
Right.
disaster preparedness, how we even talk about like risk resilience.
Yeah.
Because what we used to think of as, extreme is becoming the norm.
Right. This whole thing, it's been eye-opening, right? I mean, we always hear about hurricanes, coastal communities.
Right.
But hurricane damage in the mountains.
It really flips the script.
That flips the script. Like the impact of these storms ripples out way farther than we expect.
Absolutely. And that's why this story, Helene, it's so important. It's not about one storm or one region.
Right.
It's about understanding that like the world is connected. The climate is volatile. It's becoming more and more so, and we have to adapt.
Yeah, it's a lot to process, but sometimes it takes a gut punch like this, like Helene.
Right.
To really shake us out of complacency and force us to face these like big, uncomfortable truths.
Absolutely. Hopefully by, learning from this, supporting these communities as they rebuild, demanding better research, more proactive planning, maybe we can chart a more resilient path forward, not just for people in hurricane zones, but for everyone.
Right. It's a call to action for all of us. And on that note, we'll leave our listeners with this. If climate havens like Asheville are vulnerable, it's time to rethink what it means to be prepared, because the future of extreme weather, it's already here.